She was the girl the village feared, the girl fingers avoided, the girl named Witch because of a scar she never chose. In the quiet of her heart, Amina asked, "Why does my face carry a curse?" Elders whispered, mothers warned, children believed. Yet destiny murmured another song. On an ordinary morning, by a roadside, a man's gaze met her scar, and his soul remembered a lost child. Tears answered questions words could not hold. What truth slept inside that mark? What story would wake the village? Listen, for this tale speaks of scars, mercy, and the day fate answered. Long ago, in a place where the earth was red and stubborn, and the wind carried secrets from one compound to another, there stood a village called Oro. Oyoko was the kind of village where the morning sun always rose slowly, as though it needed time to decide whether the people below were worth its warmth. From a distance, it looked peaceful, enough mud houses, lined with care. Narrow footpaths traced by generations of bare feet, goats wandering freely as if they owned the land. Women rose early to pound yam, their pestles striking mortars in steady rhythm, while smoke curled lazily from kitchen fires. To an outsider, Oyoko appeared calm, ordinary, harmless. But beneath that calm lived something else. A silence, not the peaceful kind, but the heavy kind that comes from fear, superstition, and judgment passed quietly from one mouth to another. A silence that followed certain footsteps, a silence that shifted when a shadow crossed the path. And at the center of that silence was Latif. She was 19 years old, tall and slender, with gentle eyes that always seemed to carry apology, even when she had done nothing wrong. A long scar ran from the left side of her forehead, curved down across her eye, and rested on her cheek like an unwanted signature. It was a scar that should have been nothing more than proof of survival, but in Oyoko, it was everything. Whenever Latifa stepped outside the small mud house she shared with Mama Zainab, the air changed. Conversations slowed, laughter died suddenly. Children froze, then scattered. Move away, the witch is coming, some of them shouted, hiding behind their mothers' wrappers. Women spat on the ground as she passed. Others crossed their arms tightly or murmured prayers under their breath, as though evil traveled faster than sound. Men shook their heads, whispering stories that grew darker with every retelling. They said she was not human. They said she fell from the sky, abandoned by spirits who marked her face before throwing her away. Others claimed she crawled out of the forbidden river, a water child from a hidden kingdom beneath the earth. Some swore she killed her real family and that the scar was punishment from the gods. Latifa heard every word. She felt them settle inside her chest like stones. Yet none of it hurt as much as watching people step away from her shadow, as if standing too close might invite misfortune. She had no friends. No girl her age would sit beside her. She never danced during festivals. She never joined moonlight songs. When she fetched water from the stream, other girls shifted their buckets, creating distance without saying a word. In all her 19 years, only one person had ever looked at her and seen a human being. Mama Zainab. The old widow was poor, her body thin from years of labor, her step slow and unsteady, but her heart was stronger than the loudest voice in Oyoko. She raised Latifa without shame without apology. Still, the villagers whispered, "She bewitched that woman," they said. "How can a barren widow suddenly have a daughter, and her husband died soon after? It must be the girl." No matter how hard Mama Zanab worked fetching firewood, washing clothes, selling roasted plantain, the village refused her kindness. Some days she returned home with nothing but dust on her feet and disappointment in her eyes. Yet every morning she smiled at Latif. She cooked whatever they had, sometimes only gari and water, but always with love. She prayed over Latifa's scar, not because she believed it was evil, but because she wanted her daughter to feel whole. But Latifa did not feel whole. Each time she looked into the cracked mirror by their doorway, the scar stared back at her angry, jagged, unanswered. She traced it often with her fingers, imagining what life might have been like if she had been born accepted. She dreamed of school. She dreamed of friends. She dreamed of someone asking her what she wanted to become. No one ever did. Her world was Mama Zanab, and Mama Zanab's world was her. One quiet morning, as the sun rose behind the palm trees, Latifa stepped outside to sweep the compound. The broom brushed softly against the red earth, drawing lines that disappeared as quickly as they formed. Birds chirped. Goats bleated. Smoke curled in the distance. Then the whispers began. "There she is. Cover your children's eyes. She is not human." Latifa lowered her head and kept sweeping. She had mastered silence the way others mastered speech. When she returned inside, Mama Zanab sat by the doorway, smiling gently. "My daughter," she said, patting the mat beside her, "do not mind them. A tree stands strong not because the wind is gentle, but because its roots are deep." Latifa rested her head on the old woman's shoulder. "Why don't they want me?" she whispered. "What did I do?" Mama Zanab sighed, her eyes clouded with memories she had buried long ago. "You did nothing," she said softly. "Nothing at all." Latifa closed her eyes, unaware that the scar she carried was not a curse but a story waiting to be told. Latifa did not know that Mama Zanab was lying to her, not out of cruelty, not out of shame, but out of fear. That afternoon, the old woman sat alone after Latifa left to fetch water, her hands trembling as she tried to sort dried beans into a small calabash. Her eyes drifted toward the doorway, then beyond it toward the narrow path that led to the stream. She listened carefully until she was sure her daughter was far enough away. Only then did Mama Zanab allow herself to remember. 19 years earlier, the rain had fallen like punishment from the sky. It was the kind of rain that swallowed roads, that erased footprints, that turned cries into echoes. Mama Zanab had been returning from the neighboring town when she heard the sound metal twisting, wood cracking, human voices breaking all at once. The bus lay on its side like a wounded animal. People screamed. Others were silent in ways that were worse. Mama Zanab ran slipping in mud, her rapa soaked and heavy. She pulled where she could, shouted where she could not, and then she heard it. A baby, not crying loudly, but breathing thin, stubborn breaths, refusing to surrender. She followed the sound and found the child wedged between broken seats, her tiny face streaked with blood, a deep wound already forming above her eye. Everyone else said the child was dead. Mama Zanab did not Listen. She wrapped the baby tightly against her chest and ran, ignoring the voices that warned her to leave it alone. By the time the rain stopped, the village elders were already whispering, "Why would fate spare only that child? Why is she marked? Such children bring consequences." Mama Zanab raised the girl anyway. She named her Latifa the Gentawunas, if the name itself could protect her. Now, 19 years later, the protection was wearing thin. That evening, Latifa returned from this dream with a half-filled bucket. Her arms ached, but her heart was heavier. Near the old silk cotton tree, she had overheard voices she was never meant to hear. "She is old enough now," one man said. "The girl must be dealt with." Another replied, "The gods are patient, but they do not forget." Latifa said nothing when she entered the compound, but Mama Zanab saw it immediately, the stiffness in her walk, the way her eyes avoided light. "What happened?" the old woman asked. "Nothing," Latifa lied, setting the bucket down. Mama Zanab nodded, pretending to believe her, though fear tightened around her chest. She knew that look. She had worn it herself when the elders first warned her to leave the child by the roadside. That night, Oyoko gathered under the moon. Drums were not beaten, but voices rose low, controlled, dangerous in their calm. The elders sat in a circle, faces carved by time and certainty. The village head cleared his throat. "There is unrest," he said. "Crops fail. Children fall sick. Dreams are disturbed." Silence followed. Then someone spoke the name. Everyone had been holding back. Let the word moved through the gathering like smoke. Mama Zanab stood at the edge of the crowd, her heart pounding so loudly she feared others could hear it. She knew this moment would come. She had prayed it wouldn't, but prayers do not always change destiny. "The girl must leave," one elder said, "or the village will suffer," said another. Mama Zanab stepped forward before she could stop herself. "She is innocent," she said, her voice shaking but loud enough. "You blame what you do not understand." The elders turned to her slowly. "Understanding does not change signs," the village head replied. "The gods marked her." Mama Zanab clenched her fists. "No," she whispered. "Men did. Fate did. Not gods." But the circle had already closed. At home, Latifa lay awake, staring at the ceiling, unaware that her name had just been spoken as a verdict. She touched her scar gently, feeling its familiar ridge beneath her fingers. Outside, the wind shifted, and somewhere beyond the village, a truth long buried began to stir. She sat upright on her mat, listening to the night as if it were a messenger carrying bad news. Every sound made her heart jump: the rustle of leaves, the distant bark of a dog, the low murmur of voices traveling through the dark. She knew the elders. Once a decision was spoken aloud, it rarely waited long to act. Latifa slept fitfully beside her, turning from side to side, caught between dreams and unease. At one point, she murmured Mama Zanab's name, her voice thin like a child's. The old woman reached out and placed a hand on her forehead, tracing the scar gently, the way she had done since Latifa was small. "My daughter," she whispered, though Latifa did not wake, "if I could carry this mark for you, I would." Just before dawn, footsteps approached the compound. Mama Zanab stiffened, They were careful steps, not the heavy tread of men coming to enforce a decision, but cautious, hesitant ones. A soft knock followed 3 quick taps, then silence. Mama Sanab rose slowly and opened the door. It was Amina, the potter's wife, her wrapper pulled tight around her shoulders, eyes darting nervously behind her. "They are meeting again today," Amina whispered without greeting. "At midday. They say the girl must be sent away before the next full moon." Mama Zanab closed her eyes briefly. "Thank you," she said, "for coming." Amina hesitated. "You should leave before they force you." "With where?" Mama Zanab asked quietly. Amina had no answer. She turned and hurried away, as though fear itself were chasing her. When Latifa woke, Mama Zanab was already packing. She moved slowly, deliberately, folding the few clothes they owned, tying them with string. Latifa watched from the mat, confusion clouding her face. "Where are we going?" she asked. Mama Zanab did not look at her. "On a journey." "To where?" "Somewhere quieter." Latifa sat up. "Why?" The old woman's hands paused. For a moment, Latifa thought she might finally speak the truth. Instead, Mama Zanab sighed. "The village is restless," she said, "and restless villages are dangerous." Latifa's chest tightened. "Is it because of me?" Mama Zanab turned then, her eyes sharp despite the years. "Listen to me," she said firmly. "You are not the problem. Do you understand?" Latifa nodded, though doubt trembled behind her eyes. "Be mid-morning." They left Oyoko. No one stopped them. A few villagers watched from a distance, relief plain on their faces. Some looked away, unwilling to witness what they had silently demanded. As they walked the narrow path leading away from the village, Latifa felt something break inside her, not loudly, but completely. She had never belonged, but now even the illusion was gone. They walked for hours under the sun, Mama Zanab leaning heavily on her staff. By afternoon, her steps slowed, her breath shallow. Near a cluster of old trees, she stopped. "Rest," she said. They sat beneath the shade. The world was quiet there. Too quiet. Mama Zanab's hands trembled as she reached for Latifa's face. "There is something I must tell you," she said. Latifa's heart began to race. "I found you," Mama Zanab continued, her voice barely steady. "After the storm, after the accident." Latifa stared at her. "You survived when others did not," she said. "And they feared you because of it." "I kept the truth because I wanted you to live first, before you carried the weight of it." Tears filled Latifa's eyes. "So, I don't know who I am." Mama Zanab smiled sadly. "You are alive. That is who you are." Her hand slipped from Latifa's cheek. "Mama?" Latifa whispered. "Mama?" Zanab did not answer. The wind moved through the trees, stirring leaves, carrying away the last breath of the woman who had been her whole world. Latifa screamed, then not loudly, but deeply, a sound torn from the center of her being. She held Mama Zanab's body until the sun dipped low, until grief hardened into something else. Resolve. She buried her there beneath the trees, marking the spot with stones. When she stood again, she wiped her face and straightened her back. Oyoko had cast her out, but her story was not finished. Latifa remained by the grave until the sky darkened completely, the forest filled with night sound-stirring insects, distant hoots, the soft movement of unseen creatures, each sound pressed against her nerves. But she did not move. She spoke to Mama Zanab in whispers, telling her things she had never said aloud, her fears, her small hopes, the anger she had swallowed for years. When her voice finally failed, she stood, lifted the small bundle of belongings, and turned toward the deeper path. She walked without knowing where it led. The land beyond Oyoko was unfamiliar, shaped by long grasses and scattered settlements that appeared and disappeared like mirages. At dawn she reached a shallow river and washed her face. The scar stared back at her in the water's surface, red and unmistakable. For the first time, she did not flinch. She remembered Mama Zanab's words, "Aralivand, let the water carry the rest away." By the second day, hunger slowed her steps. She ate wild fruit cautiously and drank sparingly. Near evening, smoke rose ahead, thin and steady. A village stood there, smaller than Oyoko, its houses arranged in a loose circle. Children spotted her first. They stared. Latifa felt the old fear tighten her chest, but she kept walking. An elderly woman stepped forward, leaning on a carved stick. Her eyes moved to the scar, then back to Latifa's face. She did not recoil. "You have traveled far," the woman said. "Sit." Latifa hesitated, then obeyed. Water was given. Food followed. Food followed. No questions came at first, and the silence was strange, almost kind. That night, Latifa slept among strangers without dreams. Days turned into weeks. The Viligigani did not ask her to leave. Some watched her closely, others ignored her, but none accused her. She worked where she could, carrying water, cleaning grain, learning the rhythms of a place that did not already know her story. One afternoon, a child collapsed near the market, his breathing shallow, his skin burning. Panic spread quickly. Latifa knelt beside him without thinking, remembering herbs Mama Zanab once used, the way she cooled fevers with water and leaves. She worked carefully, steadily, until the child's breathing eased. Whispers followed, but they were different this time. "She knows healing. She has gentle hands." The elder woman watched her closely. That night, she called Latifa to her hut. "Marks do not choose meaning on their own," the woman said. "People assign it. Some fear what survives. Others learn from it." Latifa swallowed. "Oyoko feared me." The elder nodded. "Then, Oyoko was not your home." Something settled inside Latifa then, quiet and strong. She stayed. Seasons shifted. Latifa learned more of healing, more of listening. People came to her with small pains, then larger ones. Her scar became familiar, then ordinary. One evening, a traveler arrived carrying news. "Oyoko suffers," he said. "The harvest failed again. Sickness spreads." Latifa felt the past stir, but it did not command her. She looked toward the dark horizon, not with bitterness, but with clarity. The village that rejected her would face its answers without her, and for the first time, Latifa chose herself. Latifa's days in Kijani grew fuller, marked by quiet purpose. At dawn she joined the women at the river, learning which plants thrived near water and which hid their strength in dry soil. By midday she sat with the elder, whose name was Naru, grinding roots and listening to stories that taught as much as any lesson. Healing Niruset was not only the work of hands, but of patience, humility, and attention. One afternoon, as the Harmutan wind carried dust across the village, a man arrived with a woman slung over his shoulder. Her body burned with fever, her breath ragged. Fear followed them like a shadow. Latifa felt it rise, familiar and sharp, but she pushed it aside. She worked through the night, cooling the woman's skin, coaxing water past clenched teeth, whispering encouragement. She barely believed herself. When Donkame, the fever broke. The man wept openly. Others watched, measuring Latifa with new eyes. News traveled quickly after that. People from neighboring settlements came, seeking help. Some brought gifts, others brought only hope. Latifa accepted both with the same care. Each person reminded her of Mama Zanab's quiet strength, of love given without promise of return. One evening Nuru spoke as they sat by the fire. "You carry a crossing within you," she said, "between fear and trust, between what was taken and what can be made." Latifa stared into the flames. "I don't know where I belong." Nuru smiled. "Belonging is built, not granted." Days later, another traveler arrived. This one knew Latifa's name before she spoke it. "Oyoko asks for you," he said carefully. "The elders say the signs are clear now. They say only you can restore balance." The words stirred anger. Then something quieter. Latifa remembered the looks, the whispers, the long loneliness. She remembered Mama Zanab's grave beneath the trees. "I owe them nothing," she said. "No," Naru agreed, "but you owe yourself the choice." That night, Latifa lay awake, listening to the village breathe around her. She understood then that returning would not be about forgiveness or approval. It would be about closing a circle left open too long. At sunrise, she packed her bundle again, not because she was cast out, but because she was called by her own will. She touched her scar once, steady and unafraid, and stepped onto the path leading back toward the place where her story had begun. Latifa did not return to Kijani immediately. She walked until Ojoka was far behind her, until the land opened into wide plains where memory loosened its grip. For the first time, she understood that movement itself could be home. Each step carried her away from fear and towards something unnamed, but possible. By the second evening, she reached a trading crossroads where travelers rested. Fires burned low. Stories moved easily between strangers. Latifa sat among them, listening. When she spoke, it was not of curses or rejection, but of herbs, of listening to the body, of patience. People leaned closer. Respect followed without demand. A merchant with tired eyes watched her carefully. "You should travel with us," he said. "Villages along the route need healers." Latifa agreed. Days blended into rhythm. She treated fevers, eased births, closed wounds. Payment came in food, shelter, protection. Her name spread without explanation. She became known simply as the woman who helped. One night, Beneath a sky heavy with stars, Latifa dreamed of Mama Zanab. She was not old in the dream. She stood tall, smiling, her hands clean of labor. She said nothing, only nodded. Latifa awoke with tears that did not wound. Seasons passed. The road shaped her. She learned to read people quickly, to sense danger before it spoke. She learned that kindness could be firm, that refusal could be gentle. Men listened to her. Women trusted her. Children followed her like shadows. At a river settlement, an elder asked her to stay. "This place could be yours," he said. "You have earned it." Latifa considered the offer carefully. She imagined stillness, roots, a life without travel. The idea felt peaceful but incomplete. "I am not finished walking," she replied. Years later, she returned too. Kijani Nuru had grown thinner, but her eyes were sharp. She embraced Latifa without words. "You have crossed yourselves," Nuru said simply. Latifa stayed then, not as refuge, but as choice. She taught, she trained. Other healing became shared knowledge, not a single hand's burden. When children asked about her scar, she told them the truth. "It is proof," she said, "that I lived," and the children accepted it without fear. On the night of her 40th season, the village gathered. There were drums, laughter, food enough for all. Latifa watched the firelight dance on faces unafraid of her. She realized then that belonging had not been waiting in any one place. It had been forming quietly, wherever she chose to stand fully as herself. The road had not abandoned her. It had prepared her. Time continued its slow work. Latifa's reputation reached places she never visited. Stories bent and reshaped her. But she no longer tried to correct them. She understood now that meaning belonged to listeners as much as tellers. One year, a child arrived alone at Kijani, marked by fear and a baron across his arm. He would not speak. The villagers hesitated, uncertain. Latifa knelt before him and waited. When he finally reached for her hand, the room exhaled. She kept him. Teaching him was not easy. Trust arrived in fragments, but each day the child learned that survival did not require hardness. He laughed again. Others followed his example. Latifa watched this quietly. She saw her younger self in his caution, his hope. She did not tell him her story. She let him write his own. As her hair silvered, Latifa traveled less, but her influence moved farther. Healers trained by her carried knowledge onward. Villages learned to look twice before naming a curse. One evening, Latifa walked alone to the edge of the fields. The wind moved gently, like breath. She thought of Ojoko, of Kijani, of the road between. None of them claimed her completely, and yet all of them lived inside her. She smiled. The scar on her face caught the last light of the sun, not as a wound, but as a line that marked a beginning. She did not seek monuments or songs. The work itself was enough. When people asked her name, she gave it simply. When they asked her origin, she said she came from surviving. That answer satisfied her more than any lineage ever could. In quiet moments, she thanked Mama Zanab, not with grief, but with living fully. And in doing so, She ensured that no child under her care would ever be taught to fear the mark of endurance. Thus her life unfolded without spectacle, shaped by choice and compassion. The world did not change all at once, but it changed where she stood. And that, Latifa learned, was how real stories endured. They were carried quietly from one heart to another until fear finally lost its voice and hope spoke instead. It always did. Eventually, for those who listened closely, years moved gently in Kijani, measured not by calendars but by harvests, births, and the quiet passing of elders. Latifa became part of this rhythm without announcement. She rose before dawn, walked the paths slowly, and listened more than she spoke. People sought her counsel not only for sickness but for quarrels, grief, and decisions too heavy to carry alone. She never positioned herself above them. She sat on the ground, met their eyes, and reminded them that healing began with truth spoken plainly and without fear. Such moments shaped her days and anchored her purpose firmly within the village. Children gathered around her in the evenings, drawn by her calm presence rather than promises of stories. She taught them names of plants, how to feel bark and soil, how to wait before acting. When disputes arose among them, she asked questions instead of assigning blame. Slowly, they learned responsibility as shared weight. Parents noticed the change. Voices soft, hands steadied. The village felt less hurried, as if remembering something forgotten long ago about patience, care, and the value of choosing understanding over fear. This shift did not happen suddenly, but it endured through seasons and shared effort together always. Latifa sometimes wondered how many lives changed without her noticing. Change, she learned, rarely announced itself loudly. It arrived quietly, through repeated acts and steady presence. One morning, she watched a former skeptic defend a frightened stranger. Another day, she saw a child refuse to mock difference. These moments mattered. They formed invisible threads, binding people differently than before. She felt no pride, only gratitude, knowing transformation belonged to everyone involved, not a single guiding hand. Such understanding deepened her commitment and quiet resolve daily as years continued to shape her path gently without demanding recognition from anyone else present. News from distant places arrived occasionally, carried by traders and travelers. Some spoke of unrest, others of renewal. Latifa listened, absorbing without urgency. She understood that fear traveled faster than wisdom, but wisdom lasted longer. When asked to intervene elsewhere, she chose carefully, sending trained hands instead of herself. Her work multiplied through others, spreading beyond her steps. This approach protected her spirit while ensuring that knowledge did not become dependent on one person alone. It also taught communities to trust their own capacity fully and value cooperation above individual praise as a lasting cultural practice rooted deeply within themselves. One season, drought tested Kijani harshly, wells dropped, crops failed, and tension threatened old habits. Latifa gathered the people and spoke plainly. She reminded them of patience, shared labor, and restraint. Water was rationed carefully. Food was cooked communally. No household stood alone. The drought passed slowly, leaving scars but also trust. Survival felt collective, not competitive, reinforcing lessons learned over many quiet years together. Children remembered this time as proof of unity long after rains returned and memory soft pain. It became a story shared carefully with newcomers to teach resilience without invoking fear or blame during future hardships. Latifa aged gently, her movements slower but steady. Lines formed around her eyes, not from sorrow but from observation. She welcomed this change. It marked time honestly. Younger healers took greater roles, making decisions confidently. Latifa advised only when asked. Watching others lead brought her quiet satisfaction. She recognized herself in them not as replacement, but as continuation, proof that teaching endured beyond any single lifetime. This understanding freed her from fear of fading importance and allowed gratitude to replace earlier uncertainty within her evolving sense of self and place in the world. She helped shape over decades of living. On quiet evenings, Latifa sometimes walked alone beyond the huts. She listened to insects, wind, distant water. These sounds grounded her. They reminded her that life moved independently of human fear or praise. She felt connected to Mama Zanab then, sensing approval without words. Gratitude replaced grief entirely. Memory became warmth rather than ache, guiding her gently forward without holding her back. Such moments sustained her spirit more than public recognition ever could. During earlier uncertain years of searching and endurance across villages, roads, and long seasons that shaped her quietly into who she became, with acceptance and peace inside herself fully. In time, visitors asked her story directly. She told it without bitterness, without embellishment. Survival, she said, was not proof of destiny, only of possibility. Fear had shaped much of her path, but choice shaped more. Those who listened carried the lesson differently. Some felt challenged, others felt comforted. Latifa accepted all reactions equally, knowing stories live separate lives once shared. This understanding freed her from controlling meaning and allowed truth to travel naturally between hearts, cultures, and generations without distortion by fear or forced interpretation over time and distance, as living memory rather than legend bound to one place. Time eventually slowed its grip on Latifa's body. Though her mind remained clear, she woke later, walked shorter distances, rested more often. No one hurried her. The village had learned patience from her long before her pace changed. When she spoke, people listened, not because she demanded attention, but because silence had taught them her words mattered. A generation rose that never knew her as an outsider. To them, her scar was simply part of her face, like the lines around her eyes or the calm set of her mouth. Children traced paths beside her, matching their steps to hers. She corrected gently, praised rarely, and trusted deeply. Mistakes were allowed room to teach. One afternoon, a council dispute grew heated. Old fears resurfaced, sharpened by uncertainty. Voices rose. Accusations followed. Latifa sat quietly until asked to speak. When she did not settle the argument. She asked one question instead. Who will carry the cost of your certainty? The room fell silent. The question remained long after the meeting ended, reshaping choices slowly. Visitors still came, though less frequently. Some sought blessing. Others sought answers. Latifa offered neither directly. She offered conversation, observation, and time. Many left unsatisfied at first, then returned, changed. She understood then that guidance did not mean direction. It meant presence without control. As her strength faded, Latifa trained one final group. They were diverse in age and background, chosen not for talent, but for willingness to listen. She taught them to sit with discomfort, to ask before acting, to recognize fear disguised as tradition. These lessons took longer than healing techniques, but they lasted longer too. During the rainy season of her final year, illness spread again. Latifa worked briefly, then stepped aside. Others took over seamlessly. Watching them, she felt relief rather than loss. The work no longer required her body. It had found many hands. One night Nuru's successor sat beside her mat. "Are you afraid?" she asked softly. Latifa smiled. "I am curious," she replied. The next morning, she asked to be carried outside. She wanted to feel the sun once more. Children gathered quietly. Adults stood back, respectful. Latifa looked across the village, seeing not structures, but moments. She closed her eyes. When she passed, there was no panic, no rushing. The village breathed together. They prepared her body with care, speaking gratitude aloud. They buried her beneath a tree not far from where she once taught children to listen. Stories followed, as they always do. Some exaggerated, others simplified. The village did not correct them all. They allowed variation, knowing truth survived change. What mattered endured in practice, not perfection. Years later, travelers would still ask about the woman with the scar. Kijani answered calmly, "She taught us not to fear survival." And that was enough. Her life settled into memory without sharp edges. Fear lost another place to live. Choice remained. The children she trained became elders, and elders became stories. In meetings, when uncertainty rose, someone would ask her question again. Who will carry the cost? The words guided decisions like a quiet drum beneath conversation. No shrine bore her name. No festival marked her passing. Yet her influence threaded daily life, shaping responses before fear could harden. When strangers arrived marked by deference, they were fed first. When signs confused, people waited instead of accusing. This practice, repeated, became custom. In distant places, fragments of her story blended with others. She became many women, a healer, a survivor, a scarred guide. Truth did not weaken in this spreading. It adapted. The lesson endured without her voice attached. That pleased her memory most. The road she once walked continued under many feet. Some never knew why patience mattered. They practiced it anyway, and so the work continued, unnamed, unclaimed, alive. It lived in pauses, in withheld judgments, in hands reaching outward rather than pointing. Long after names faded, the pattern remained. A village that listened before deciding, a people who remembered that survival was not suspicion. In this way, Latifa never truly left. She moved forward through others, quietly, endlessly. The elders taught children this without story or warning. They modeled it. Over time, it felt natural, and that was her final gift. No fear announced itself. No lesson was forced. Life simply leaned, gently, toward care. And so the village endured, not perfect, but awake. It would take generations to forget her name, but never her way. That was enough. It was always enough. The earth remembered. People followed. Quietly. Together. Time kept moving. The lesson stayed. Fear never returned in the same way. Choice replaced it. That was her legacy. Unspoken, practiced, alive, it continued. The seasons continued to pass in Kijani, steady and unremarkable, exactly the way lasting change prefers to move. Children who had once sat at Latifa's feet now carried water with their own children walking beside them. Paths widened, where feet had traveled often, not away from the village but through it, connecting homes rather than dividing them. The habits she helped shape no longer felt taught. They felt inherited. Disagreements still arose. Hunger still visited. Loss still arrived without invitation. But fear no longer led the conversation. When uncertainty appeared, people possessed antelisan. They asked. They asked. This slowing became instinctive, a collective breath before action. Outsiders noticed it first. They said Kijani felt different, quieter, but not weak, careful, but not afraid. One year, a stranger arrived at dusk, carrying a child marked by fire. The burn twisted the skin of the boy's neck and shoulder, raw and unmistakable. The stranger hesitated at the edge of the village, waiting for rejection he expected. Instead, someone waved him forward. Water was brought, food followed. No one asked what had happened until the child slept. Later, the elders spoke softly among themselves. Someone mentioned signs. Another began to speculate. Then a young woman, trained years earlier, shook her head. We know better than that. The conversation ended there. The child healed slowly. He stayed. No one spoke Latifa's name that night, but her presence shaped every response. That was how her influence lived, now unnamed, unclaimed, unquestioned. Years later, drought returned. Harder this time. Wells dried faster. Crops withered early. Surrounding villages fractured under pressure, turning suspicion inward. Kijani struggled too, but differently. Decisions were shared. Resources were pooled. The weakest were protected first. People left to trade, to negotiate, to learn. They returned with knowledge rather than blame. When the rains finally came, survival was uneven, but dignity remained intact. The village did not celebrate resilience as triumph. They treated it as responsibility fulfilled. Children born during those hard months grew up hearing no heroic tales about the drought. They were taught instead how people waited, how they shared, how they chose restraint when fear tempted excess. This teaching shaped them quietly, more deeply than dramatic stories ever could. One evening, a traveling storyteller stopped in Kijani. He asked what legend the village held most dear. The elders looked at one another, uncertain. There was no single tale they repeated often. no carved symbol, no song sung every year. The storyteller found this strange. "What do you pass down, then?" he asked. A woman answered simply, "We pass down how we respond." The storyteller stayed the night, listening. By morning, he understood. In distant years, Kijani changed, as all places must. New homes replaced old ones. Paths shifted. Some families left, others arrived. Yet the pattern endured. Deference did not immediately summon fear. Survival did not demand suspicion. Marks were not interpreted as warnings, but as histories. Children learned early that belonging was built by action, not granted by appearance. Elders modeled uncertainty. Without shame, decisions remained open to revision. These habits did not prevent harm entirely, but they softened its edges. If asked where this way began, answers varied. Some pointed to a healer, long gone. Others said it came from hardship. Many shrugged, and said it had always been so. All were partly right. Latifa's life no longer existed as a sequence of events. It lived as a posture toward the world, a willingness to pause, a refusal to accuse without understanding, a belief that survival was not evidence of danger, but of endurance. In this way, her story avoided the trap of monument. It did not freeze into myth or ritual. It remained flexible, responsive, alive. It changed as people changed, while holding its shape beneath the surface. That was its strength. Long after the scar that once defined her became irrelevant, long after names shifted and memories thinned, the choice she embodied remained available. Each generation encountered it without knowing its origin. Each faced the same question, phrased differently each time. "What will you do with the one who survives?" Kijani answered without words. They listened. They waited. They chose care, and the story continued. Not as something told, but as something done, again and again, wherever fear paused long enough to loosen its grip. That was the ending, not a closing, a continuation, carried forward unfinished. Alive. Alive.